Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to show you how to analyze your data using ATLAS.ti. In my previous video, I showed you how to import your data, develop demographic variables, and also create containers for your research questions. After you have created containers for your research questions, the next process is to code your data. So what is coding? So coding is all about going through your data, identifying information that is significant, and then developing codes and themes to help you to address your research question. In this presentation, I'm going to give you a brief information about coding and the types of coding, and then I'm going to show you how to use ATLAS.ti to code your data. As you can see here, I have my codes here. If you click on this, you can see all the codes, the two containers that are created for the research questions. And when you click on this arrow, you can see the codes that I've created. So the numbers here show the number of significant information that has been connected to the codes that you have. You can see these codes as containers. So let me start here. I first created two containers for my research question. So each container is for each research question. And under that, I have my codes. All the codes I've created. You can see all the codes for the first research question and all the codes for the second research question. But how do you create these codes? This is what this presentation is all about. Let me give you a brief information about qualitative coding, and then we go back to ATLAS.ti. Qualitative analysis is all about developing codes, sorting the codes so that you'll be able to come up with themes. Sometimes you may have to develop a theory, but for this presentation, I'm going to also show you how to develop code. Sometimes the way that you do your coding will be based on the type of analysis that you have chosen. There are many types, but the popular types are content and also thematic analysis. You can do content analysis or thematic analysis using ATLAS.ti. So what is content analysis? So content analysis is all about creating containers or creating codes and themes, and then you go through the data, right? Identify information that are significant and connect them to the codes and themes that you have created. So before you go to your data, you have already created codes, and then the codes then will be informing what information that you have to take from the data, the significant information. So it's like you are searching for information and dropping them into the predetermined codes or themes, right? So that's all about a content analysis. It's quite different from thematic analysis because thematic analysis, you go through the data first, identify information that are significant, and then develop codes or themes. You connect the significant information to the codes or themes that you have created, right? So you see how in thematic analysis, the significant information inform the kinds of codes that you're going to develop, right? But the content analysis, the codes that you have developed inform the kind of information that you are looking for from the data. So in this presentation, I'm going to focus on using thematic analysis, where you go through the data, identify information that is significant, and develop codes and help you to address your research question. Another thing that you have to think about is what is significant information? So significant information is any information that can help you to address your research question. So this means that you are going through your data with your research question in mind, identify information that is significant, creating codes that represent the information that you identify at the same time addressing your research question that you have. So this is the information I want to give you concerning the thematic analysis. So imagine all these doors are transcript information, right? So with the research question in mind, you look for information that is significant. Now you have identified information that is significant, which is this yellow doll. Then you have to tag it. Tagging means that you are developing a phrase in between 2 to 5 words to represent information that is significant, right? And that is it about coding. Very simple. So as you can see here, I have identified relevant information here, and based on the research question or based on the relevant information, I was able to develop a code called flexibility in working hours. The code is addressing the second research question, which is burnout solutions. So you see here, second research question about burnout solutions. And then it's also representing the significant information that was identified in the data, right? So the code always plays two roles. The first row is to represent the significant information. The second row is address the research question that you have. As I said, make sure that they are in between 2 to 5 words. We want to make it a little bit short. Don't use one word as a code because one word is a little bit broad, right? So trying to have 2 to 5 words just to represent the significant information. So this is all about coding. Now that you understand coding, the next step that I want to show you is to open ATLAS.ti. When you open the desktop version of ATLAS.ti, this is what you're going to see. You see all your projects. So the project that we want to open is the burnout. So as you can see here, we have documents. Documents are the transcripts. I have 5 transcripts here. If we click on this side, you can see all the documents here, the 5 transcripts. And then I have codes. I have only 2 codes because I haven't started the coding yet. I've just created containers for the research question that I have. So I have 2 research questions, burnout causes and burnout solutions. I've created containers for the research question because this will help you in organizing the codes that you are developing from the data. Imagine that you don't have containers for the research question. You just develop codes and then put them there. The development of the themes will be a little bit difficult for you, right? So it's always advisable to go through the data with the research question in mind, but create containers also for the research question that you have and then code and put them under the respective research questions. One of the best practices of coding using software. What we're going to do is that we're going to create containers and put them under their respective research questions. So the containers will be called codes. How do you start? Very simple. You go to document, you double click on the first transcript. You can start with the first transcript. So this is my transcript. And I already have the containers for my research questions here. The next step is to go through and identify information that is significant. There are some times where you identify information that has nothing to do with the research question, but is relevant. You want to document it just to help you to better understand the findings. You can create another container called other findings or other observation and put that information there. Any information that you think is relevant but has nothing to do with the research question, yes, you can document that. So how do you create that container? You right-click on the codes, you go to new codes, and then you can say other findings, or you can say other observations, right? And then you can click on create. It's not required. Now we have a container that you can put any information that has nothing to do with the research question, but you want to code that information. You can put them here. I also want to emphasize that it's not advisable to analyze the data based on your interview questions. The reason why you have interview questions is to collect rich information from participants. When it comes to analysis, you focus on your research question or the objectives of the study, and you analyze the data based on the research questions, not based on the interview questions, right? So now what you have to do is that now we have the first transcript. Then you go through, and if you see anything that is significant, one thing that I think it might be significant is the long hours. This might be addressing the first research question, which is the causes of burnout. So the next step is to right-click on what you have selected as significant, go to apply codes. Here, you have a lot of options, and that's what I like about ATLAS.ti. You can create your own code. So I can say having long hours. I right-click here, go to apply codes, and then I type my code having long hours. I put the long hours in quotation marks because I'm taking participant own words to do the coding. Whenever you are taking participant own words to do the coding, just to remind you, you can also put quotation mark, but you don't have to do that. You can just type having long hours without a quotation mark. But this one is just for me to remind myself that I use their words to create my code. Now, if you are satisfied with the code that you have created, then you can click on the plus sign. And then I click on my plus sign. And now I've done the coding, right? Another thing is that you see when I code, it's not under the research question too. So what are you going to do? You have the two options here. You can select and drag and drop into the first research question, right? So it will ask you, do you want to move this information under research question 1? Yes. And then you select this one. So now you see that the code has been moved under research question 1. Another option is to just drag this one and drop it into the respective research question. In this case, I can drag and drop it into the first research question. If you want to create a memo, so a memo is where you create your reflections, right? Anything that's going through your mind as you go into the data that you don't want to wait and then reflect on that information, you can document it and you can come back and reflect on what you have written. So if you can click on the plus sign here, and then you'll be able to name the memo before you create. So I can say that about long hours, right? And then you can create a memo and then you can start typing your reflections here. When you finish, you can close it because that information will be under memo if you want to go back and look at it. So that's also about a memo. So let's continue to do the coding. So I've identified something here again called numerous clinical and administrative tasks, right? This one is part of the causes of burnout. So we can create a container, a code, and put it under the research question 1. So you select that. When you select significant information, you have to first make sure that you understand what participant is telling you. After understanding, you have to think about what phrase should I use to best represent this information. So you right-click here and then go to apply codes. And then you type the code name, right, which is having numerous work-related tasks. And then you click on plus sign. You haven't finished yet, you can close this one. And what you have to do is to either drag the code and drop it under the research question, or you can drag it from here and drop it into the research question 1 and click on move this information to research question 1. So you see how I have it here. So whenever you create a code, it will not directly go into under the research question that you want it to go. You first create it and then drag and drop. So that's how you have to do the coding process. Let me try and show you another way of coding and other options that you have. So there's another code here, lack of balance with work and home life, with often caused by physicians to feel stressed, right? That information is significant. So this information is very significant because it's also telling us about the causes of burnout. Now, what you have to think about is imagine that you don't know the kinds of code you want to use, right? So you can right-click on it and go to apply codes. And then you can go to suggested. So this means that the system will review what you have selected and suggest a code for you. So you click on suggest and the system generates something, especially if you are not clear about what kind of code or you want to get ideas about a code that you want to use to best represent this information. It will suggest, but there's a little limitation here. It doesn't take into consideration the research question that you have. You see here, the system was able to suggest things for you. So you can see here that it says burnout causes as one of the suggestions. I don't think it really reflects what we have selected. Stress, stress is one word. Maybe you can, this one gives you an idea, so you can add experiencing stress, but you have to think about, does it really represent this information that you want to code? And work-life balance. I think this one is quite close to what participant is saying. So you see, a system suggests a code for you, and if you are satisfied with the suggestion, you can click on that, and it will show here what you could do, you can even adjust it. If you are okay with what is here, you can click on the plus sign. If you are not, and you want to make an adjustment, I think this one is talking about lack of, right? But this one is a little bit neutral. So you can bring lack of here. And then when you are done, you click on the plus sign, right? So you see that when we close this one, we see we have coded this information, but it's not under the first research question. So we have to drag and drop. As I said, you have two options. You can drag it here and drop it into the research question, or you can select it from this part and then drag and drop and then click on the second option, right? So you see how if you don't have any idea about the code that you have to use, the system can suggest the code and you can make an adjustment to the code there before you can click on the plus sign. The only limitation, as I said, is that it doesn't take into consideration the context. It's only taking into consideration what you have selected. So don't over depend on this function, but it can give you some ideas about the codes that you can use to make sense of the information that you have selected. So let's go through. So another one talks about engaging in reflection, right? So if you think this one is significant, I think this one is addressing the second research question, right? So what you have to do is to select and then right click. And I didn't talk about code in vivo. So the code in vivo means that if you want to use participant own words to code, then you can click on code in vivo. So imagine that like this one, we want to use the participant own word to code. We just click on code in vivo and then the code has done, but still is outside the research question too. So we can drag and drop it inside. If you decide that, oh, I don't like the name of this code, right? What can you do about it? It's so simple. You go click on the arrow here and go to the code that you want to change. You right click on it, you go to rename, and you'll be able to rename this one. So let's say you don't like the name and then you want to use maybe something like engaging in meditation. You type engaging in medication and then type of rename. So you see how the name has changed. So you can always rename it. If you want to delete, you can right click and delete from the project or remove from the, so if you delete from the project, you will not see this code anywhere, right? But if you want to remove from the coding, it will only be removed from this one, but it's still going to exist. So that's the difference one. So you can always delete, you can rename if you want to. So you see how we are creating containers based on a research question that we have, and then bringing the codes under their respective research question. Another principle that I want to let you know is that when you're going through the data and you identify information that is significant, you always, especially if you already created some containers for the codes, you always have to look at, okay, what is participant telling me, right? And then you ask yourself, what code should I use? And then you can also look at existing code and see whether you can drag this information or connect this information to existing codes, right? Because the principle here is that do not create codes per each relevant information. You create code when the existing codes cannot house the significant information that you have created. Think about codes as like containers, right? So you go through the data, identify information that is significant. You already have existing codes there. So you ask yourself, oh, can I drop this to one of the existing codes? If there's no connection between the significant information that you have identified and existing code, you create a new code. If, let's say, I found something here, and let's assume that this information is about having long hours, right? I just right click and go to apply codes and then look for having long hours. Where is it? You see here, it always shows the code at the last part. So it shows the research question and then the code. So I just click on this one and then the significant information is then connected to the codes, right? So again, when you see this one, you say, oh, this one is about having numerous work-related tasks. You right-click and then go to apply code and then look for that, having numerous work-related tasks. You can pull this one to see everything. Oh, let me do it again. I selected this one. Right-click, apply code, and then you can expand this one if you want to and click on this side so that it should be blue and you are connected to the code. So you see how you create codes and connect to the significant information. So let's say you have this one, having time with family. This is significant information addressing the second research question. There's no code here that talks about having time with family. So you can right click here and create a new code, having time with family. And then you can click on the plus sign, right? And then you can move it, drop it under research question 2. So this is how the coding process is. When you finish the first transcript, you close it, and then you go to the second transcript. You click on the second transcript, you double click that, and you open it. And then we do the coding process again, right? So we are coding it onto the existing codes. And then if anything new, you create a new code, right? So the same principle, you select and right click and go to apply codes. And then you can type the code here, click on the plus sign, drag and drop. So it's the same kind of process you go through and then so let's say one of the solutions was taking family vacation, right? So as you can see here, we talk about taking family vacation, right? You select that, you right click, apply code. I think I see that there's no code here that talks about taking family vacation, right? So you have to create a new code. And then you click on a new code and click on the plus sign, right? And when you finish, you have to go here and drag and drop into the second research script. And then you click on move taking family vacation under research question 2, which is burnout solution. So that's how the coding is. When you finish, you go to the third one until you finish all the coding. And when you are done, this is how it's going to be, right? Let me show you how the final product is going to be. So as you can see here, go to codes, you click on that, you have all the codes here. I've created all the codes. The numbers here, 3 means that you have 3 significant information connected to this code. 15 means that there's a 15 significant information connected to this code. How did the system got 15? Added all these numbers, right? And it got 15. Here, for having numerous work-related tasks is 4 significant information connected to that. We go to the second research question, the same thing, we have the numbers there to show. So that's how the coding process is. You see how simple the process is. It's all about identifying information that is significant and creating codes and then connecting the code to the significant information. This process is more about thematic analysis. If you are doing content analysis, it's quite similar. You first create the containers, right? So how do you create the containers first? Let's assume that you have the research questions here and you are doing content analysis. You already have the codes. You right click here and you click on add code. And then maybe one code is this one, right? Taking vacation. You create that code. And then the code normally will be under the one that you right click. You see that it's directly under the research question 1, right? So you can create all the codes. And then when you finish, you can go through your data and then select significant information, right? And you can right click on that, apply codes, and look for the code that you want to drop that information in, right? And then click on this icon to be blue, showing that you have connected significant information into that. And also the coding strategy that I've given you, you can do it for document analysis. If you are reviewing literature, the same process. It's all about going through the data, identify information that is significant and develop codes and themes, right? The same process for any kind of data that you have. I hope this one was helpful. If you have any question, please let me know. My next video will be about categorizing the codes so that you'll be able to develop themes. So as you can see here, I've grouped the codes to form themes, right? So the next video will be about how to develop themes using the code groups function. So how to do that. I hope this one was helpful and thank you for your time.